Good afternoon. I'll call this workshop to order. And first order of business is to ask Madam Clerk to please call the roll of council members present.
Yes, sir. Councilman Fogarty, Councilman Lawson, Council Vice President Rigo,
Here.
Councilwoman Souza, and Council President Rogers.
Here, the records show there are two members of the council present. Just going to lower this volume. I'm hearing feedback. Is that a little better? So this is a public workshop. It was advertised appropriately, and there will be no formal voting tonight. We had to hear from professional consultants who've been working for quite a while on this project. And basically, while they will explain the logistics, there are state laws that we have to codify as a city, as a city council. And then there are other things within zoning that are up for discussion, and we've invited community to take part throughout. So tonight is just the start of the conversation, and we'll go through some of the recommendations. And what I would ask is for the presenters who are here tonight, for the benefit of the record and anyone here watching and maybe watching the live streaming, if you could just identify yourselves, first name and position, and then we'll get started shortly after that. So I'll start with on my left, across the way there.
Hello, good evening. My name is Peter Friedrichs. I'm here with Libra Planners with my colleague Kim, who's to my left, who you'll hear from next. And when we go through our presentation, we'll talk a little bit more about how we came to do this work for the city.
Good evening. My name is Kim Salerno, and I'm the principal of Libra Planners, the consulting firm that's helping East Providence with technical assistance for housing zoning.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm Keith Brines, Director of Planning and Economic Development for the city.
And Patrick Hanner, I'm the principal planner for the city and the planning department.
Thank you. Thank you all. And we have our Deputy City Clerk is with us this evening. I am expecting at least another council member to come forward, come to the meeting. He's running a little late, but we're not required to have a legal quorum for this workshop purpose. We'll also have the city solicitor here with us shortly. So we're going to keep it informal, and we'll start. I would just invite the participants that you can move the mics if you have to. Just be careful on the cords. Some of them are short cords. Peter, I think you've got enough room to pull that one in front of you more. You should be comfortable. And with that, I'll turn it over to our consultant for introductions or president of the company. Thank you.
So good evening, and thank you for having us. My name is Kim Salerno, and I'm from Libra Planners. I'm going to do a few things tonight. I'm going to introduce you to our firm and the grant that the city of East Providence received for us to perform this work for you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of our project. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the policy considerations that we have been thinking about and talking about over the last year and a half. I'm going to walk you through some ideas that we've explored with other municipalities, including Newport. And I'm going to just give you a foundation of things to think about that inform the zoning decisions that will be presented tonight and discussed tonight. So with that, Quentin, can you please move on to the next slide? Okay, so to begin with, the state in 2003, established a grant program administered through Rhode Island Housing, which is an entity that functions in many ways to support affordable housing throughout the state. The state used the organization to distribute funds to municipalities to provide technical assistance for the cities and towns to adopt legislative changes that had been recently enacted by the state legislature. So you may recall in 2003, the speaker got together a housing package and he created many changes in order to stimulate development and support additional housing. Some of you may not know that Rhode Island is in last place for creating housing in the country, and our population is growing. So that's something that needs to be fixed. The Rhode Island Housing created a consultant roster, and in the name of efficiency, it asked consultants to present their credentials and show that they could hit the ground running with this technical assistance. So we as consultants provided that information, and soon after the laws were enacted, we got on board with a number of municipalities to help to support those zoning changes. And Peter, my colleague, is a city planner by training, but he's also an attorney, a land use attorney. We did not provide legal advice, but we had the expertise to inform the policy decisions and also assist with language for housing policy.
Can I interject, keeping it informal, so I hope you don't mind. For the benefit of the public, this is a complicated process at best. Council Vice President Rigo and I have met and looked over this and talked with our attorneys and department heads. And so this wasn't a project for some layperson council members to just throw together. And it was expensive. So what was the cost to city taxpayers, if there was, other than the grant?
There was no cost. So this is, I think that's important for Rhode Islanders to understand. It was administered through the state. Peter, what was the origin of the funds?
So it's a conveyance tax on home sales above, I believe, $800,000 across the state. So it's wealthy real estate transactions that are funding this state technical assistance to ease housing development at the municipal level.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that the legislative changes were mandated for the municipalities. So some towns didn't actually seek the assistance, and they did it themselves with staff. And I think a lot of them regretted that afterwards because the money was available to every municipality.
So a good portion of what we'll hear tonight are mandated by law.
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah. So we worked with Keith to develop the grant proposal and develop the scope of work, essentially. So next slide, please. So this is just a little introduction to us. I'm the lead. I have a background in architecture and in planning. I served on the planning board in Newport. I was also a college professor for 25 years. And I also had an architecture firm. That's my background. Steve Irvine, who's also my husband and a business partner, was a biologist. He did all our mapping and data. That was particularly useful for the inclusionary zoning work that we did for you. And then Peter, our law and policy expert. Next slide, please. We have actually conducted a number of events to help solicit public input from East Providence residents. This is a photograph from one of those events. The slide actually talks about the scope of work that Keith essentially developed, and we helped shape for the grant. But a big piece of this was the inclusionary zoning ordinance, which you'll learn about tonight. The 2023 laws asked us to look at the land use regulation and revisions, so we assisted with the preliminary work that was started in-house. And similarly with comprehensive land development and subdivision regulations. We decided to review the zoning ordinance comprehensively, and we explored transit-oriented development. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit of basic, this slide is actually more for the general public, just to understand why it's necessary to do this. From the Roger Williams or Housing Works Rhode Island fact book that is put out by an organization at Roger Williams, they actually aggregate economic and housing data, and they put it in this book so that the people like you, leaders, can understand what are the conditions on the ground. And one thing we've learned is that 18 to 24-year-olds are deeply impacted by housing shortages. This is something that people in leadership positions may not completely appreciate because we tend to be older and more comfortable. That surprisingly, educational attainment is not consistent with housing access and affordability. And that it really is a looming problem with the younger generation. So EP housing facts. These facts actually come from the 2023 fact book. It's a little bit obsolete, but this is when we actually started the grant, so it's the data that informed our initial discussion. And at that time, the median household income for EP was $65,016, and 27% of homeowners and 50% of renters in East Providence are cost burdened. It's a complicated way of saying that in considering all the metrics, it's just too expensive to pay for housing for most of the people. The median home price at the time was $365,000, increasing 35% over the last 6 years. At this point, that might seem quaint because, of course, the cost of housing has gone up. And that one of the greatest indicators of the lack of production of housing was how few permits were issued, and thus the need for these technical changes that could make it easier for people to get permits to build. Next slide, please. Yes.
Question, please, before can you go back to that last slide, please?
Yes.
Okay.
Quentin, can you go back, please?
By chance, where are we, as you state here, 27% of homeowners and 50% of renters in East Providence are cost burden? Where is that compared to the rest of the state? If you can, you have an idea. I'm not, you don't have to totally.
I don't have that for you right now. We can certainly look it up and send it to you. The information we heard at a forum earlier today about housing continues to be a pressing issue for the state was that if you make $103,000 a year as a household, you cannot afford to buy a home anywhere in the state of Rhode Island, which includes East Providence. So the price of housing has gotten to the point where what we considered middle class and even above that are having a hard time affording housing.
In the last bullet, obviously in 2022, we're pretty developed as far as building permits, single family or multifamily. We're a pretty densely populated city. Where are we compared to other maybe densely populated areas like a Cranston or Warwick? Cities, obviously their population is, we're number 5. Where are we compared to Cranston, Warwick, and say even Pawtucket? The 3 in front of us.
Your planning staff might have better information, but I think East Providence is already a leader. You've seen that with the waterfront district and some of the more recent housing developments, particularly in the commercial centers in the city. So I know Providence has made a lot of moves in recent years to try and attract more development and is seeing the benefits of that. I think East Providence might be a close number 2 in terms of how it compares to other cities in the state.
Yeah, that is my general sense too, and from information that I've seen, is that we're doing relatively well compared to other communities in the state as far as approving new building permits over the past few years.
But the need persists. Okay. Next slide, please. So I don't think I need to go through this line by line with you, but just suffice it to say that there, we did consider the statistics for East Providence. I mean, we looked at a lot of different municipalities. We were in Newport, we were in Barrington, we were in Foster, we were in Pawtucket. Every community has a different set of conditions on the ground. We recognize that, but these are the particular statistics that speak to the socioeconomic conditions in East Providence.
Your report tonight, this was provided to the city administration. Is this what we have online? I know we have some information on the city website, or is this the first time this is out for public viewing? Keith, do you know?
I don't think this was put online. I think this is just presented for the first time tonight as far as these slides here.
Is that something that could be sent to?
Absolutely.
Okay, we can.
So the data has been public for years. And we have used the sort of typical sources that people use for the data. This presentation is essentially a presentation that helps to describe the policy ideas that you need to think about.
And summarizing is fine going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, just the big takeaway here, I think, is nationally the change has been 50 years ago. You had a lot of 7-person households, families with a lot of children. And nowadays, households are much smaller, a lot of single-person, 2-person households. So even if you have the same population, there's a desire for more housing units. Given that you have a smaller number of people in that household, maybe the housing units can be smaller, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, as opposed to 4-bedroom that they may have been historically.
So the population is aging, the household size is decreasing. More people want to live by themselves. It's an issue, but it also creates pressure on the housing market. So,
And also, Mr. Pimentel, you're in charge of if there's any tiffs going on here with the solicitor and the vice president. You notice I seated them side by side, so the sergeant couldn't make it, so I appoint you in charge. With that, please continue.
okay. Do you want to move on to the next slide?
Please, yes.
Okay, so so we came in to help with the 2023 mandates, and then in 2024, a series of mandates came out, and we helped with that a little bit as well. And the 2024 mandates include non-conforming sites revert to the nearest minimum standard. Is that clear what that means? Should I explain it? Okay, so say there's a zone that requires 10,000 square foot lots, and in that zone is a 7,000 square foot lot. Well, that property will actually have to conform to the 5,000 square foot lot zone instead of the 10,000 square foot lot. So it means that the rules are relaxed for a number of properties that exist in zones that might be overzoned for that property. In some communities, that can be significant because there are many non-conforming properties in certain zones. That's something that we've talked about with the EP staff, and there's not a complete sense right now of how many lots are non-conforming. So that's something that we're thinking about right now. In other communities, we've actually performed the task of looking at how many non-conforming properties there are, because it was obviously a problem for the town, and they asked us to do it. additional state requirements. DPR, Development Plan Review, becomes an administrative tool. That means what was once the authority of the Planning Commission or the Planning Board, now the staff can actually do it. The idea is that if the approval is not as impactful, then we can allow staff to facilitate approval so that projects can happen expeditiously. And then projections and the setbacks are allowed. We have a slide that's going to talk about what that means a little later, so I'll get into that. And then regarding the 2024 mandates, these were the recommendations that we made. Permanent ADUs. Does everybody know what an ADU is? Okay, accessory dwelling unit. Establish administrative development plan review to supplant zoning review. So this is giving Keith a framework for doing that. And then providing development incentives. So going one extra step to like encourage housing development. Next slide, please.
When you say that, are you talking about tax incentive breaks over a period of time? Is that something that you have under that
Oh,
item?
we did not wade into that. We speak to an existing system in East Providence where there's an ordinance that allows, I believe, an administrative approval and then an opportunity to petition the council for a higher level of approval.
That's not to say that the council couldn't explore other avenues for facilitating development that are independent of the technical work that we do. So this is an introduction into housing typologies. This is something that we talked about this with a number of communities, just trying to get them to understand that there's a lot of different ways to think about multifamily housing, and there's no one size fits all. And certain typologies might be better suited for different communities. And the types that are highlighted in red are the types that already exist in East Providence. In numbers. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this talks a little bit about the history of our work with the planning staff. This slide on the right illustrates that phenomenon we were talking about household sizes getting smaller. This slide illustrates a way to think about additional housing within the housing fabric that you already have. There's a lot of pushback throughout communities about changing community character. This is a way to think about housing that doesn't change community character. Use the housing you already have, change the way housing is regulated so that more units can be found in the same number of houses. Again, household sizes are decreasing. We could preserve community character, increase options. It's important to recognize that the two groups that seem to be impact in an outsized manner are the elderly and the young. Elderly are being prohibited from making choices that they might want to make because they really have nowhere to go, and the young just don't have the opportunity at all. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that talks about a strategy that we were exploring early in the process and something that we discussed with the planning staff. It's exploring multifamily housing is something that that would help every community create more housing. We mapped potential locations to place more multifamily housing. One of the things I'd like to say about it is that in many cases, people are already actually using the property in that way, and it would just be legitimating the practices that are already in place. So for example, there may be a house that, for all intents and purposes, is a single family house, but it actually functions as a multi. Next slide, please. This is a slide of an architectural development by a local Rhode Island design firm. We're looking for typologies that might be new, that might. Oh, do you know the project? Well, it's a good one, right? So, yes. So the house typology is something that we think could encourage the kind of placemaking and support the kind of uses that are in need and desired. We think this typology actually suits the EP physical environment, and that it fills a niche for smaller housing. I mean, one of the problems with big families, big houses, is it's not supporting small houses, household sizes, multiple units.
So, again, what I was looking at in vision, and maybe this, if you maybe you have the answer, not have the answer. Are we looking? Are you saying I'm estimating that's probably like a 600 to 700 square foot,
It might be a little bigger,
a little bigger,
yeah. Maybe 800, yeah.
accommodate 2 to 3 bedrooms.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously not a lot of storage space, so you're not becoming a hoarder and everything. But yeah, because I've done some work, having had my father being in that business, God rest his soul, and coming up with ideas of 600-700 square foot houses that can fit 2 and 3 bedrooms and everything. So that's why I was just trying to see if you knew what the.
It looks, I mean, just looking at it, it looks like about 800.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I wasn't off by that far.
Yeah, I don't know this particular development.
Yeah.
I know it had a mix of unit sizes, so I don't know in this image which sizes those are, but it is in East Greenwich if you want to go take a look
You
at
can
it.
get me the address
Yeah.
after. I will.
Yeah,
My warehouse is close by.
great.
Next slide, please. So this is something that we considered early on. This is a photograph of Riverside, and it's small lot zoning. It's it's really the essence of the zoning reform for housing. And in a place like East Providence, there are already places that essentially have this, and we're suggesting that that East Providence continue with this idea. Riverside, it already is small lot zoned, essentially. Small lot zoning serves the additional function of really creating community. It's a good place to live. It's great for young families. It's the kind of thing that isn't being built today and could be, a good approach. Next slide, please. And then again, thinking about placemaking and housing, and recognizing that, for comprehensive planning, it's really important to think about a lot of things simultaneously. So in our work with many communities, we might be thinking about economic development. We might be thinking about historic preservation, a lot of different things at once. And so it's important to think about, what are the assets in East Providence? East Providence has some great small housing that already exists, and I think you should build on your strengths. And some communities have a very active HEZ, health equity zone. The small lots and the small housing is actually good for promoting walkability and healthy lifestyles. So it's again something that we think kills 2 birds with 1 stone. Next slide, please.
Question, when you looked into all of this, do you have an opinion or feeling on the amenities that East Providence offers? For instance, this would have to be in concert with a community that offers good recreation and open spaces. You're obviously not talking about putting a house on every square inch of grass in the city. So do you have an opinion on the city overall, and it's, to let you know, I think there's a nice blending is important.
Yes, of
The
course.
small housing is great, but we also could use a few places like we already have. I'm not saying we're going to get more, but like a Kettle Point, Phillips Landing, some bigger homes, increasing the tax base, but then also that smaller row unit you showed has promise for
So we worked in
affordability. Yeah.
a number of places that have like environmental sensitivity or watersheds that shouldn't be impacted, um, or places where there's a lot of conservation. So we do understand that it's important to have balance, and it's important to provide opportunity for housing in places where other opportunities exist. One of the things that we explored with the planning group was a transit-oriented development. And that means you locate the densest housing on the busiest bus routes so that people can get to work. Yes, I mean, we are familiar with the geographic variety in the town, and the sense that there's a kind of strong urban core. There's a historic area with this earlier development pattern, and then there are, outlying more bedroom type communities. So yeah, I mean, of course, we've thought of that.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So we just included a few slides to talk about the analysis that we did with Newport. We worked with a planning developer that had like some very specific ideas about what she wanted to explore, and she was convinced that a number of zones were overzoned. And we have our background in Newport, and in that community, 80% of the properties are non-conforming. It's kind of a regulatory nightmare because anybody that wants to do anything to their house has to go through the process. So what we did with them is we actually looked at the zones, we looked at the regulations that cover the zones, and then we looked at the properties that were constructed in those zones, and we asked the question, does the property match the zone? And in many cases, we discovered that the properties are indeed overzoned for what exists. In other words, if you liked what happened in downtown Newport on the water, you couldn't build it today with the rules that they have. So that's one way to think about it. Next slide, please. Administrative development plan review. Again, this idea is something that we explored with that city, but it's really important to maintain a strong planning staff to do that. You're lucky you have a lot of bodies in Providence, in East Providence. Not all communities have the wherewithal to support the planning department in that way. Since you've chosen to do that, you might as well use them. You have a number of planners on staff that could really ease the regulatory burden for the community.
Are you sure about that? They're asking for more help. But
Sorry.
continue. You saw 3 or 4 people scurry out of here.
Okay, next slide, please. So this is the slide I mentioned earlier, projections and setbacks. One of the effects of having a stringent law about setbacks is you get architecture that is basically a box and not that interesting. And if you write the regulations in such a way, you can permit and even encourage distinctive architecture. And that's something that we think, because Providence does have some historic architecture, you would benefit from that approach. What did I say? I forgot East. Sorry. East Providence. More carrot, less stick. That's something that I always encourage. Next slide, please. So these are the initial recommendations that we made to this community. Of course, we have to follow through with the legislative mandates, and that's something that Peter will talk a little bit later when he presents the actual zoning. We think that permitting 2 and 3 family in these 3 zones would be very helpful. It's a kind of simple fix that could really open the door for the kind of the number of new units that would really help. Um, and then, of course, considering community character and the, you know, the condition of the place while we do that. Next slide, please. So about 2 and 3 family homes, yes, they already exist here. It's the housing type that's really needed by the people that are housing challenged. It supports a renting community, which is also important, and it is sort of the most effective in giving the numbers that you need. And what we try to show with this slide is that there's this perception that affordable housing is, I don't know what the example is here, but I used to live in Chicago, and it was Pruitt-Igoe, and that was this like horror 40-story office, affordable housing building that was just a sort of location of social decay. That doesn't exist today. There are ways to create affordability in the community that can be harmonious, attractive, and supportive of the people who live here. Next slide, please. And then, of course, Peter will walk you through the inclusionary zoning that we've talked about. And again, we can make inclusionary, affordable housing that is attractive, that has a low concentration of poverty because it's inclusionary zoning, and that it has an approach to design that's appropriate for this community. And the next slide, please. And this is something that we are also exploring is transit-oriented development. The state just recently defined eligibility. We've looked at East Providence Transit, and that's what this map shows. And we've thought about where you could include transit-oriented development to support both the existing transit and the relationship of workers to their residents.
And just for a note to the council and the public, this would be the Route 78 line, which goes over the Washington Bridge up Taunton Ave to Pawtucket Ave and Newport Ave in Pawtucket. And that's the where we're looking at is a potentially eligible line under the 2020 State Transit Master Plan.
Yeah. So to step back, what transit-oriented development is identifying high-frequency transit for development and providing incentives for that development.
But now in East Providence, most of the transit would be on our main thoroughfares like Pawtucket Avenue, maybe Warren Avenue, Broadway. They're already really developed with housing. We don't have. So would that not apply as much?
So this is it's primarily a state grant program to provide funding for developers and municipalities to encourage dense housing development in those transit corridors. So we're waiting for the housing department to release the regulations, but the state goal is to make it attractive to direct state funding to those areas.
Another question, when you mentioned as an example, the 3-deckers, and there's been a lot of conversation about people would like to see them again come into prominence, and this might be beyond the scope of what you were doing, but how do we answer the question that the existing 3-deckers, the rents are unaffordable for a lot of people? They are for young families. They are for almost anybody. Their rent for a second and third floor apartment, as we know it, the 3-bedroom apartments that are fairly spacious, cost more than most mortgages. Is there any way to address that through zoning? I don't.
So I just want to say a 3-decker sold in my neighborhood for $1.3 million.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I understand.
Right.
I mean, the basic principle is increasing supply is going to stabilize the prices.
Yes, I think also inclusionary zoning is an opportunity for additional affordable units. And also the triple decker of tomorrow might be
smaller.
to make it more
Mm.
affordable.
Well,
Yes.
I would add too at this time that we did have two other participants join us. City Solicitor Mr. Marcello is here, and also Mayor De Silva is here. And I'll ask them at some point when you finish a little more of your summary if they need to add to this. This is a one city operation, so I want to hear from them as well. But continue
I think we might be at the last slide.
about it.
Oh, yeah. Any questions?
At some point tonight, will we get a definitive list of these are the mandates, you have to do it, there's no question about it, and then these are not mandates,
So,
recommendations.
so I think we're probably have produced about 1,000 pages of
Yeah,
materials
You know.
for the city. What's in front of you tonight is a small portion of that. So one document is I think an 83-page list of zoning amendments that the city staff have discussed early and believe that is required by state law. And that's the priority for the council to consider. It needs to go to the planning board for recommendation at some point. But the idea is to prioritize the council's consideration of that. We also have in front of you an inclusionary zoning ordinance that the administration believes is a priority, so that as this additional housing development comes, it is also providing the types of housing that the city populace needs. Beyond that, we talked a little bit about it. There's this opportunity for transit-oriented development, and also we did develop a new codification of the zoning ordinance that would change the organization of it to make it more user-friendly and also provide some of the changes that we've been talking about this evening.
and as I stated at the outset, for those who may be joining in a little bit later, this isn't it tonight. We're not deciding. There are no votes tonight. This is beginning of a public conversation, and we have some time. Mayor De Silva, you have a little bit of time on the clock. Would you like to make a statement? I'll slide this down.
First, I want to start off by saying thank you to the City Council and our Planning Department and the associates from Libra. It really has taken a lot of work and input from all of you to craft this together. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is the collaboration between myself and our administration and the City Council leadership. We all hear all the time about how out of control rents have become. And East Providence is unique in that we have a lot of property that can be developed. We have a lot of former brownfields that can be developed. A lot of that sits within the East Providence Waterfront District Commission, which already has a 10% inclusionary zoning. During my time as mayor, I had the pleasure of getting to know Tina Gannett from Real Access Motivates Progress. And I got that right? Okay. And she opened my eyes up to what fully physically accessible housing is and why it's such an important thing for our community. And it's not just for somebody who may be having issues with mobility now, but as we age, we start to feel, these aches and pains, and sometimes we become less mobile. So in discussion with the council president, vice president, Councilman Fogarty, and our planning department, Peter, we crafted what I think is a unique and first of its kind zoning ordinance that would have to get approval from the council. And that would not only require 20% of affordable housing on any development over 10 units or more, but additionally 20% of those units would have to be fully physically accessible. So that's pretty exciting. I don't think there's any other municipality that has that type of requirement. So I want to thank the council. I want to thank Peter. I just want to come here and offer my thank you, my appreciation for working collaboratively on this very important issue. I feel strongly that with all of the potential development, now this would not apply to existing developments that have already been permitted. For instance, the stuff going on at Metacomet and some other big projects that have already been permitted. But in the future, and we know there's going to be more development, in the future, now you would require 20% affordable. And that would open up the door to allowing some of our residents to maybe continue living in the community they've been in for the last 80, 90 years. So thank you, Council President, Vice President, Peter, Keith, and the members of the city staff here who have all been very important in contributing their input into everything that's coming before you today. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't thank our great city solicitor, Mike Marcello. Thank you for working very closely with Peter and Libra to get these things put together. I know it's complex, not an exciting topic all the time, but it's really a significant change that's going to position our city in a place to make it available to everyone. So all people of all backgrounds can live here. So thank you all. Thank you.
So the 2-page inclusionary zoning document that the mayor mentioned might be easier and more quickly reviewed in this workshop than the 83-page required amendments document. The public also might be more interested in the inclusionary zoning document. So I suggest that perhaps we review that document first, and then we can dive into the details of the required amendments.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And we will continue to have a conversation with the mayor and his staff about defining what is meant by affordable. That is the question we all get asked on the street corners. Yeah, you all talk about affordable housing, but what is it? And I know there are different degrees. We have things like one neighborhood housing and SWAP that have come into the city with some highly successful projects. And then there is the regular affordable housing that has guidelines. It's not something that's arbitrary, that it goes by income and size of family, et cetera. So we will make sure that we make that clear. So do you have this proposal that you just outlined, that the mayor talked about?
Yes,
Yeah, okay. Do you want to go through that for us? And
I'd be happy to.
Well,
And I believe it's also on the screen
it's up on the
so that
screen,
folks
okay.
in the audience and at home can follow along. It looks like it, yes. So this is called inclusionary zoning, which is a term that's set out in the Zoning Enabling Act put forth by the state legislature. So all zoning ordinances that municipalities in Rhode Island make are required to conform to that Zoning Enabling Act. So this inclusionary zoning law that would require affordable housing and fully physically accessible units conforms to that law. So that's why the ordinance is termed this way. And starting out here, the first paragraph states that any developer can take advantage of this ordinance. So if you're putting, a 20%, really for the numbers to work, it's 5 units. If you're doing 5 units, you get the benefits of the ordinance, but you're not required to follow it. Once you get to that 10-unit threshold, there's a lot of regulation at the state level and in many municipalities throughout the state for developments 9 units and less and 10 units and more. So that's why we picked this number. It also creates nice round numbers for the 20% figure. So at that level, 10 units or more, you're required to meet the requirements of the ordinance required to have those affordable and fully physically accessible units. So
you're affordable by guidelines, not necessarily, as some people refer to, Section 8, which is not
Right,
much of
Section
that
8
around anymore.
as a funding program that's a housing voucher program, and you used to have those big tower housing developments, public housing developments that were funded under that.
But this is not that.
So this does not require any federal funds to go to construct the housing and subsidize the tenants. This is by the zoning provides that mechanism for the affordable housing to be constructed, and then it's required to be maintained as affordable, we have in here a period of 50 years. Also, this second sentence in this paragraph here talks about not concentrating the development in any particular area of the city. The idea being to encourage disbursement in many neighborhoods throughout the city so that folks of all means and abilities can live in every part of the city. And then the second paragraph here, the state has a definition of affordable housing, so we're meeting that definition. The other goal the state has is that 10% of the units in the municipality are classified as affordable. East Providence is very close to that. I think you're at about 9.5%. And there are municipal regulatory benefits tied to meeting that 10% goal. So part of the goal of this ordinance is achieving that 10% goal for East Providence and also keeping East Providence above that goal in the future. So that's what this second paragraph here talks about. And then there's the subsection 1, which is talking about this applies to any contiguous property, and you can't subdivide the property so that you're doing 9 units here, 9 units there. The idea is that it applies anytime you're getting 10 units or more. That's also subsection 2 there. And then that ties it to the 2 requirements of subsections 4 and 5. And now we're at the top of page 2 on the copy that I have, which talks about when you have a fraction. So let's say you're doing 11 units, you round up to the next whole number. And that's the common practice for when affordable housing is required. And then subsection 4 is that 20% requirement for affordability. That follows the state definition, which is 80% of area median income for rental. And the rent you can charge goes up the greater number of bedrooms you have. And then for home ownership, that's 120% of area median income. So it ends up being, I think it's around $300,000 now for a 2-bedroom property. So it's pretty competitive.
So I think that's the
home
number that the
prices.
council president and the council struggles with all the time. So it's the area median income to be
Set by
set by state or the federal government.
yeah.
And there's a different calculation for rentals versus home ownership.
Right.
Correct? So what are those numbers as of today? And they go up. They
It
fluctuate.
depends on the number of bedrooms,
Right,
which is
okay.
tied. So the way the state does it is they assume 1.5 occupants per bedroom. So a 1-bedroom qualifies as a 2-person household. And that ends up being where the rents are around $1,000 for those smaller bedroom units. And the sale price is around $300,000 for home ownership.
So it's not only tied to the area median income, it's also tied to the number of units, bedrooms in that house. So it's a fluctuating number. I think there's a chart that the state does usually
Yes.
provide. We can provide that to the council so they'll have a good
Yes.
better idea. I think there's a chart. I could be wrong with that.
So you said a 1-bedroom house, the state uses 1.5 people,
Right. And they round up.
and the cost would be so that house could sell for $300,000.
Right.
So to multiply that out, a 3-bedroom house could sell for $900,000.
No, it's not. It's not.
All right. No, I was just gonna
Yeah,
say. I
yeah,
just
yeah.
wanted to
Not a
see if
straight-
we were just. It's not
right.
a straight multiple.
No, it is not.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm just a little comfortable because
Yeah.
why am I here?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 No.
But a 1.5 bedroom rental is about $1,000, right? That well, a rental 1.5 bedrooms would be about.
No, there's not 1.5 bedrooms. So
Sorry.
they round up.
1 bedroom.
Right.
rental would
Right.
be
The numbers
2 people,
currently.
would be 2 people. Would we round it up to 2 for occupancy for 2?
Right.
Am I getting this wrong? Right.
No. Right. You got it.
So the rent would be approximately $1,000 a month.
Right.
Affordable rent, right? That's what.
That's the rent you're allowed to
that's the rent
charge
you're allowed
for
to
that
charge.
size of.
So
you
I
know,
guess
you go up to a 4-bedroom. It's
for
probably
comparison, and maybe the
more like
council president,
1,500.
council vice president would have a better idea. What does a 1-bedroom apartment rent for in the city of East Providence now, non-affordable? Do you think it's probably like
Well,
1,800,
It's a lot more than 1,000, yeah.
1,600? You think?
16, anywhere from 16 to 18.
So
Yeah.
right. There's a lot of policy considerations here. The state is on the cusp of changing this comprehensive permit law, which allows developers to go around local zoning and propose very large developments, very dense developments. And so this ordinance is designed to give the city as much control over its destiny if that law passes, or if it doesn't. Those 80% for rental and 120% for homeownership were set by the state law 20, 25 years ago, and the state has not chosen to amend it. We can all see the discrepancy between rental units and homeownership units, what that tends to result in developers building homeownership units, which I argue is probably a better thing because it allows folks to invest in their future and have their monthly house payment go towards something that they'll get back when they move out. So I think that as convoluted as the system is, I think it does create a better neighborhood and a better city. But to what we've all noticed, it's a glaring difference, and the state may choose to change that in the future to make it more even between the two types of housing.
And another aspect of this could be said this way, that not doing this or not looking for ways of affordability would just mean the status quo is market rate. You get what you get. Right. People can get, and they're getting it. You know, the homes are being sold in days. You talk to realtors and they'll tell you there's no such thing as asking price anymore.
Right.
It's, you know, bidding wars. And so we're all struggling and we're finding it hard maybe, but there are people out there that are buying homes at astronomical prices, and rents, people are getting them, and there are a lot of people hurting. So to do nothing here, to not find an affordable housing answer, means we continue with market rates and people suffering. And so that's why I'm in support of trying to start the conversation. Let's do something better than nothing.
Yes. So subsection 5 here is the fully physically accessible requirement. We did split that between those affordable units and the market rate units. So it's not just folks of limited means who might need accessible units. It's also folks who might be quite wealthy, and your single family home is not designed for someone who has mobility issues. So it might be as simple as doorknobs that have the little handle on them, the lever, so that you can open the door more easily, wider doors, and also a ramp into your apartment. So if you have issues with stairs, you don't need that. Fully physically accessible is a term of art. So the idea here is that we're aligning with best practices, and that as those standards might change and improve, the city will stay in compliance with those, and that as part of the building permit inspection process, we'll make sure we're meeting all of these requirements. Commercial buildings are already constructed to ADA standards. Larger apartment buildings are. This would go down to the single family home level if you're doing a 10-lot subdivision. So it really is giving opportunities that don't exist, frankly, anywhere in the country, really, where you've got single family homes that are market rate and built for folks who might have any sort of mobility impairment. Subsection 6 here is the requirements that you have to meet in order to follow this ordinance. One is that these required units receive their certificate of occupancy prior to the non-required units that you might be building. So you've got this 10-unit development. 2 are affordable, 2 are fully physically accessible. Of those, the 7 units that are not restricted, you can't get a CO on those until you've built those 3 units that comply, 3 or 4 units. And then this subsection 6B here is requiring that those units be put on site. So you can't, in the other part of the city, put these units up. If you're building an attractive development on Narragansett Bay and you've got 10 units going in, you have to have those waterfront units, 2 of them be affordable and 2 of those be accessible.
Yeah, that is a major piece. We have a developer here, and the place was nameless right now that did that. Prior to this council taking over, kept all the nice property together, and all of a sudden bought property close by to here, and didn't want to put that affordable house in there. So
Yep.
It's good for the geese. It's good for the ganders.
There's also
I sit on this council.
There's also historically been a practice of allowing developers to buy out of their affordable housing requirement So they just pay money to the city. The amount that the state has set is only $40,000 per unit, which just doesn't begin to cover the cost of doing an affordable housing development. So this does not require payments. This does not allow, excuse me, this does not allow developers the option of paying. They actually have to construct the units.
So that's important. I'd like everyone to know that this council, I'll speak for myself and at least Council Vice President, we've talked about this. We are definitely not supporting, nor does this say anything about traditional tax breaks for developers. This is a straight program that gives incentive to come in and build here, but not getting a tax break. They're not, as long as there's owner occupied involvement, that's an advantage. And we're not going to do what, as you've just outlined, allow, that is not part of this, and that no developer is going to be allowed to opt out by giving us a check.
Right.
And saying you can put that 20% somewhere else in the city.
Yep.
It's a requirement. If you're going to build, you need to do this. Okay, just want to make that clear.
So item 6 here is the period that the housing would be required to remain affordable. It's 50 years. The state requires a minimum of 30, and the general consensus on what the maximum is 99 years. So we picked the period here of 50 years. And then
Thank you.
item 7,
Yeah, I think it would be just helpful just to highlight what the incentive is. Obviously, if you're going to require a developer of 10 or more units to have these 20%, they do get an incentive to do so. So
right?
it's not,
That's the next item.
it's not a tax incentive. Well, there are tax incentives that exist already in the books that they're
Yes.
eligible for.
Right.
But it's a density bonus that they get. And I think
Right. That's the next one. Yep. 7A.
Yep.
So this is required under the law. So in order to have this ordinance have any sort of requirement for affordable units, you have to provide the density bonus. That also is our mechanism that allows us to get to that goal of 10% affordable housing. So the state requires that for every affordable unit you require, you have to allow the developer the ability to construct at least one additional unit. We had some concerns
regardless of the zone. Right?
regardless of the zone. And it could be a commercial zone, it could be a residential zone. But as soon as you're allowing the housing and you're requiring the affordability, you have to have the bonus units. That number has to be at least 1. We had some concerns that you're making a development less profitable and therefore a developer less interested in the development, less likely to even pursue the development by requiring the affordability. So we increased that incentives a little bit up to 1.5. So that means if you have 100 units proposed for development without this ordinance, we're requiring that 20 of those units be affordable. You then get the 1.5 on the 20 bonus, so your development becomes 130 units. And we thought at this moment in time under the current market that would reflect the cost of constructing those affordable units. So let's say a housing unit is $400,000 now to construct. You can only sell it for $300,000. You're losing $100,000 per affordable housing unit you're building. You're able to go on at the end there and sell those market rate units for a little bit more money to pay for the cost of the construction of the affordable units.
Here's a 10 unit example.
Yeah.
So
13 then. Yeah, you go from 10 to 13.
Walk us through that. Just start your 10. So
Yep.
So so there's, you start with 10, 20%. So there's 8.
Right. Market rate.
Now you get the 1.5,
So there's 3 bonus units.
10%, 20%. That's right. So 20% is 2.
And then 1.5 times 2 is 3. So you end up with 11 units market rate and 2 affordable.
So you start out with 10 and you've got 13.
1.5 is based off of the 10.
off of the 20% affordable.
20%.
Right.
Yeah.
The bonus is given on affordability part.
Yeah.
So if you were gonna get 10, 20% would have been 2, and now you got 1.5 times the 2, which is runs up to 30
And
extra units.
if you have like an affordable housing developer come in and they're going to nonprofit, they're going to do 10 affordable units, they can build 13. They can't build 30 or whatever the math is.
The math that gets us confused. It's a bonus on the affordable units that you get
Required,
more.
only on the required ones.
So it's controlled by
Yes.
the city.
So we won't get those housing towers that
Right.
that have historically had issues.
And let me ask Keith, from your perspective, your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the number makes sense. And developing an ordinance like this, it's sort of a balancing act. Like if you make it too demanding and say, you know, you need a ton of affordable units and you don't get a lot of density, then developers will say, yeah, no thanks, I'll just go to the community next door. And you won't get the housing construction that you need and you won't get the extra affordability. So we tried to do something that struck a good balance, and that 1.5 sort of speaks to that, where 1 just didn't seem like it was enough of a density bonus.
Thank you.
So the 7B here, property tax, that is a state law. There's no change to any municipal policy with this. That's just providing notice that this state law is available. And that's the same with 7C. That's a local ordinance on tax stabilization, just letting folks know this is available. It's not changing any of the underlying city policy in
Criteria-
Chapter 16, Article 5.
We're just spelling it out for them so that they don't have notice of it, but the criteria doesn't. It's nothing new.
Right. 7D is parking. This is an additional incentive. This reflects the parking maximum requirements under the comprehensive permitting law. So this is just aligning with that. It's been shown that residents of affordable housing have less cars than market rate housing. Oftentimes as well, the occupancy in those units is restricted. So you don't tend to have the kids back from college that move back in with their parents. So that 1 parking space per unit requirement is there. And then also as an incentive, there's a reduced parking requirement for the market rate units, acknowledging that with the additional density, it may be more difficult to locate parking on the site. 7E, we have it as an incentive, but it's really an incentive for the affordable housing residents. And that's that they have full access to all of the amenities of the development. If there's a swimming pool, they have to be allowed to have access to it, just like every other resident. They can't be treated any differently. And then finally, 7F here, we'll really get into with the required zoning amendments, but there's this land development project process that's existed in the state for about 25 years, or 30 years, sorry. And within that, you're now required to provide dimensional incentives. So this just lets folks know that as that ordinance has changed, like any other development, they can take advantage of this zoning incentive. And that's the ordinance.
So, I mean, the important takeaway is it's triggered by 10 or more units. So if you want to build 9, it's not triggered. 10 or more. Council President had a great question to me. Is he talking about 10 houses or 10 units? And it's 10 units. So it could be 10 individual house lots in the development, or most likely it would be probably 10 units in an apartment building, right? Apartment building. Because the city doesn't really, I mean, I can't speak to this, but maybe Keith can correct me. We don't have large stretches of land where you can probably put a new 10 lot subdivision. We're dense enough right now.
Not much of that.
There's not much left for that, I don't think. Oh, he knows one. But anyway, so that's
So as part of the workshop, as I've said, there's not really a lot of, or there won't be any voting. We have, I think, maybe just 3 people who've attended who are not city staff. But I would invite at this time to take a quick break, and then we don't want to belabor this because we want to move the night along. But young lady who is here, Tina, now we have not talked about any of this, but we briefly chatted before the meeting, and you had some things to say. So I would invite you to, if you'd like to say something, to come forward, or if you're happy just listening and watching, let me walk this over to you.
Thank you very much. Oh, you don't want to give you my address because I'm the last house in Rhode Island in Burrville, but I'm dying to be an East Providence girl. So this is why accessible housing in East Providence would be my dream. I've been wanting to live here, but my name is Tina Gannett. I run my own nonprofit, Ramp Rail Access Motor Rights Progress. We do the accessibility for the state, but I'm also a federal appointee to the United States Access Board. So I not only do the accessibility for the state, I do it for the country. According to the Fair Housing Act that we're working on, what we're trying to propose up there is 25% of any state or federal money housing units be fully physically accessible. The reason why we say that is because if FEMA was to evacuate the state of Rhode Island today, 56% of Rhode Islanders are registered as a mobility aid evacuation, and there's 1% of housing for us. There's no shelters that are accessible. There's nothing available for us. And the housing that is available is in manors or high rises. That doesn't do well for the family that has children in wheelchairs that want to live in their community, or I'm in a wheelchair, my children are not. We still want to live out in the community. And we want to have different types of housings. We work, we have jobs, we're active members of society, but not only do we want to have physically accessible housing for us, but I make friends with all of you. You have birthday parties, you have family functions, you have outings, we want to come. So by building accessible, you now have the visitability progress going where now I can come to all of your events. Like when you did that row of housing, remember the picture of the row of housing? If all of those stairs went away and you did a side ramp adjacent to the deck, you have enough ramping for us to get in. It doesn't take away from anything of the house, but now I can visit all of those other units that are in that row of housing. That's the important for us to have community. We don't need a lot of land because trust me, I don't want to mow my lawn. It's horrible. I can do it. I don't like to do it. But we don't want to do our lawn. We don't want to do that. So we don't need a lot of land, but we do need a yard for those of us who have service dogs, that we want to just be able to be on a first floor, open the door, let our dog out. I don't want to be dressed at 5 a.m. or 11 at night to take my dog out. These are acts that people don't think about. When the mayor tonight said that this is a first for the state, this is a first for across the country. We can't get data on this because nobody's doing it. We just changed the Fair Housing Act. It's not been enacted because you all know what the political, I don't want to get into that. So it hasn't actually been enacted yet, but by the state of Rhode Island, that's an hour and a half long, and the city of East Providence, which is to me, the prettiest and the most centralized of our states. If we went accessible, the rest of the state would follow. And wouldn't it be great to be the leader in something, to be taking care of the society that no one's taking care of? We are all one diagnosis, one accident, or one age away from being in this community, either temporarily or permanently. If we do not build accessible housing, we're going to be in a lot of trouble, because I have 30 people in wheelchairs on the street because I have no place to put them. We need to fix that, and we need to make that go away. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you all. Thank you.
And I think when we had discussed, excuse me, I think when we had this discussion with Peter, the cost of this to make these accessible is not exorbitant. It's a little more. It doesn't add much to the housing stuff. The cost to construct such housing into be
Right, and so one of the
benefits are
keys
great. So
of this ordinance is that you can build a different type of unit to meet the requirement. So this aligns with the need, and so it could be that the cost of the fully physically accessible unit is less than what your market rate unit is. The importance is that we're having integration throughout the city, and that we are producing these units so that they can be utilized.
So the inclusion, just for the benefit of the council and the public, the inclusionary zoning ordinance is a separate standalone that is will be at some point be referred to the planning board, or we're waiting for their recommendations, but it's been drafted through the work of the consultant. So that you'll see that in a more ordinance form in the future. But assuming that it has the support, I think it would make sense to get it to the planning board, let them comment on it, and then get it back to the council. That's how we would do it. And then we'd pass a formal ordinance after another public hearing. So that's where we are. But this was just to introduce you to the terms and to the concept of the entire ordinance. Thank you, Peter. Now we're going to get to the fun stuff, I think, right?
Yeah.
So
Fun for the attorneys, and
yeah,
that's
fun for
about
the
it.
attorneys. Yes, I frankly don't like to hear that, but Council Vice President, I mean. So as you know, the state over the last 2 years has passed a tremendous amount of zoning changes, mandatory zoning changes, that basically we really have no choice but to enact to conform with state law. Peter and working with his team and the planning department and the staff have put together, which is the 83-page ordinance that you have with a proposal. We're going to go through it pretty quickly because, as I indicated, most of this is mandatory. But I the purpose of this is to give the public and the council some comfort level as to what we actually are changing and why we're changing it and what it actually means. So you'll hear some of them are definitions that we've adopted that the state requires us to adopt. There's a thing called Unified Development Review, Unified Development Review, which is now required. It used to be optional, and we'll explain a little bit what that is. It's designed to help the planning process to move a little smoothly, so you can go before one board instead of going before the planning board and the zoning board. But I'll let Peter take it. And a lot of it's repetitive. Like we aligned the notice requirement, which was like they got rid of the certified mail. It's now first class mail, which is cheaper for the person who's trying to do development. So you'll see anytime there's a notice requirement, you'll see that it's changed from first class to from certified mail to first class throughout the ordinance. So that, it's a lot. Some of this is repetitive, I guess what I'm trying to say. So there'll be a lot of changes, but some of them unnecessary, repetitive changes. So thank you, Peter.
So there's 2 sections to the ordinance. The first section is this paragraph on the first page. That's a change to Chapter 2, which is the powers of the planning board. So Mike mentioned Unified Development Review. That was previously enabled as an option. It's now a requirement in state law. So that is, if you are doing a subdivision, a land development project, or development plan review, those are those more detailed site plans where a planning official is looking at the detailed designs to make sure that the designs are consistent with the city's goals. That is done at the planning board. If you need a variance or a special use permit, you have to go to the planning board. You can no longer go to the zoning board the way things used to be. So zoning board is only reviewing projects that don't have that additional planning element to it.
So if I was developing a 11 lot subdivision and I was going to get 11 lots and a couple of those lots needed dimensional variances, maybe the setback or the road frontage wasn't quite right. Under the old system, you start at the planning board. They would grant a master plan approval contingent upon you getting relief from the zoning board. The entire application would be sent to the zoning board. They would rule on whether or not you're going to get a dimensional variance, which required a whole other advertisement, all public hearings and whatnot. And then once they made the decision, assuming it was a favorable decision, it would go back to the planning board to complete whatever development they had. I know the council president was here when this was first proposed by the state. It was an optional. So Council President Berto at the time had an ordinance to allow to make it mandated mandated. That didn't go anywhere. And then the state now says you don't even have the option anymore. The planning board must have this power. So it does weaken a little bit of the authority of the zoning board for new projects, but the policy decision behind it is that a developer goes before one board now and gets all the relief they needed. There's no more bouncing back and forth. So that's mandatory, and that's what the term Unified Development Review means.
Right. The other phrase that's in here is development plan review. As I mentioned, that's similar to land development projects where the planning officials are taking a look at a project and making a qualitative evaluation on if the project design aligns with the city's goals. we'll get into a little more detail about the difference between the two. But what we settled on is that both of these processes have their advantages and disadvantages, and the city benefits from including both development plan review and land development projects as regulatory tools. So we're adding that as an additional power and duty of the planning board. And it's required by state law that the review authority for both development plan review and land development projects be with the planning board. We can't assign it to a different body, unfortunately. So then we get to definitions in the zoning ordinance, which is section 19.1. Accessory dwelling units we've talked about. This is the state definition, so we're required to follow that state definition. This ordinance changes the language to mirror the state definition. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about some of the effects of this, but an accessory dwelling unit is now permitted by right under certain circumstances. Let's say within the existing structure, on all single family and all multifamily housing developments. And so we've been trying to figure out how to align the ordinance with that new definition of state law. And we have, there's a whole ADU section further in this ordinance where we'll talk more about that, but we can't change the definition and we can't be any more restrictive than the state allows the city to be. So that definition is here. I think the page numbering might be a little off.
They got three. It's a basement, so that, again, that's adopting the that's page 3 of our thing. So that's a state law definition.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, to the extent that the council wants to go through the definitions, we can. But I will tell you that all the definitions that are in this ordinance are as proposed are required or aligned with state law. So
Right.
nothing we can do about it other than educate you what those definitions are.
So
Yeah, I don't think we should waste
Development-
time on that. We'll certainly talk about it more other meetings, but it is what it is.
Yep. So, development plan review, again, the state has provided a definition of that such that if you're reviewing plans, they really need to align with either development plan review or land development project. So that will have impacts elsewhere in the ordinance, that new definition.
It's controversial, not controversial, but the household, we might want to just touch on the new definition of a household that we're required to adopt.
Right. So
That's a page.
the state changed the definition. They've exempted these NARR certified residences, which are folks, single family homes for folks in recovery. So those can have more than 4 unrelated persons. But the definition matches the state new definition. So we had to change the number of permitted residents within it, the number of permitted unrelated residents in a household. One of the policy things to think about here is what happens if a household has too many residents in it. And that is not addressed by this definition change.
Group homes, we have quite a bit in the city here. Do we need to add language because it doesn't say anything about group homes?
I think there's another provision.
There-
That's not a change. I think group homes would be exempted by this. Yeah,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
yeah, that's a good point. But just so a household is now a family, which may also include servants. I know that Frank has a bunch of servants at his house, and employees living within the family, and or a person or group of no more than 5 unrelated persons living together, but no more than 1 per bedroom. So a household is now up to 5 unrelated people. So, but it does not apply to registered recovery homes. So you could, I know there was an issue in the city. I forgot where part of the city it was, but for this, yeah. So those are exempted, so that you can have 20 people in an NARR home, but otherwise you can't have more than 5 unrelated people under our ordinance and to comply with state law or servants.
So I believe the next revision I have here is the change in the notice of application. So again, that's first class mail, and we mirrored the state zoning enabling act distance, which is in or within 200 feet of the perimeter.
Excuse me, there's a wheel on the right side of that. You can adjust volume.
Right, thank you.
Might help. Don't bang it because we're going to send you the bill to replace that microphone.
There's also, so specifically in 2023, the state forgot to amend the requirements for a special use permit notice. So that
What page are you on?
this is bottom of page 23, going
Thank you.
to page 24.
So again, they changed the notice. One of the things that we wanted to do is make sure that how you measure the 200-foot radius is consistent with state law. We had a little bit of different definition. It was difficult in application, so we asked the consultants to look at all the notice requirements and the 200-foot radius or whatever the notice requirement was, and to conform that with state law. So you'll see throughout this ordinance that when they talk about a radius, it's from the perimeter of the actual lot, right?
Yes,
Yes, or the structure.
not the structure.
Shoot the lot line, and that's something that we fixed. So you'll see those changes throughout. It looks like there's a lot of changes, but again, as I indicated, anytime there's notice requirements, we conformed it to make sure that it was consistent throughout. So
So yeah, the next several pages are all
all notice requirements.
notice things. If you jump down to section 19-56, which I have as the top of page 28,
So 27.
those are accessory dwelling unit permitting requirements that assign duties to the zoning official, and we've concluded that those are unenforceable under the new ADU minimum
Those are
requirements.
all the strikes.
So we've stricken that language.
Just explain that because that's going to be, I'm sure, a little controversial when we get back to the full council. So the reason why that was stricken, because the powers that were used to be delegated to the zoning officer to approve ADUs, because ADUs are now, frankly, a matter of right. They don't have that power to deny or grant anymore, correct?
Right.
Generally, it.
And that's the same in section 1957, further down on that page.
So not only the changes are mandatory, but some of the strikeouts are mandatory because of the changes.
So ADUs are allowed and the city or town cannot.
There's a few restrictions you can do. So in the
Restrictions, but you
in
can't.
the ADU section, we
block it.
do have those, but you can't make it a special use permit or anything like that.
We'll get to the
Okay.
For the basic ADU. Yep. Then there's more notice information. And then we get down to the use table. So that's section 1998. I have it as page 32. So the zoning ordinance had the term one family in some places and the term single family elsewhere. The state uses single family, so we're changing the use to align with the state term. So it goes from one family to single family. And then there was a lot of talk about two-family dwellings. The substandard lot state law amendment from 2 years ago has been thoroughly analyzed in many contexts and is in litigation in many municipalities. The hope was to avoid litigation here, and that is where you have a use tied to a minimum lot size that might not be enforceable. So we've elected to propose that it be a special use permit, and under the special use permit, as part of those specific and objective criteria that are required under the state law amendments from 2 years ago, you can have the minimum lot size there. So that's what we did, is we moved it to a special use permit with a criterion that the minimum lot size be met. And then there's also a change from 2023 where you add additional requirements to a use. So under the multifamily here, that's just kind of a information. It's not really tied to the use, that there's a land development project process. This is top of page 33. But further down, you'll see some crossouts. the state created a process where if you don't strictly align to a listed use, you can apply to the zoning official to be considered as that use, and it's a special use permit. One of the problems being that there's not necessarily criteria for that, and might be a permitted use. So what you want to do when you're at a use table now is create as broad a category as you can, as big a net, cast as wide a net as you can to encompass any use that might be related to that, because a savvy developer will try and align themselves with a use even if it doesn't strictly align under the letter of the written language. And then in the middle of page 37 here, where it said trailer courts, the state has provided a definition for manufactured home, which is what they're referring to as what we might previously consider a mobile home or something like that. And so those are regulated by federal law. It's basically anytime you're transporting a housing unit or a portion thereof on a truck. And the state has aligned their definition to the federal definition. They may ease the use of manufactured homes around the state, but they haven't yet done that, just provided a state definition.
I just want to go back because I know this could be, want to make sure the council understands. It's in R5 and R6 zones. Two-family homes were previously permitted, but it was tied to a square footage of the lot. Because of litigation that's going on in other communities, and after consultation with our consultants and the zoning officer, we believe that that square footage, putting that square footage requirement in the use table would probably make it illegal or not enforceable. So what they did is a two-family dwelling will be allowed in an R5 and R6 zone. However, it's by special use permit, and so that you have to apply, and there's objective criteria that you have to get it. So it's not automatic. There'll still be review by the zoning board, and they have to meet those specific objective criteria, which I think you pointed out already.
It could be the zoning board. Sometimes it might be the planning
New construction could be the planning board, right? But
Right.
yeah, it could be either. We'll get to those specific and objective criteria.
Yeah, and this is something that we struggled with in doing this draft, because we talked about earlier, especially in Kim's presentation, about how we wanted to make, some of this housing more doable. So you might think, well, why are you making duplexes a special use permit then? Which is arguably more of a process, but for the reasons that the solicitor and Peter talked about, it was really the only way to get around this new legal issue that has come up for us to still have that minimum lot size.
The other thing is that every single family home is now allowed an accessory dwelling unit. So whereas 5 years ago, those might have been counted as two families, they're now technically under zoning as single family. So what we're really talking about with two family properties is two family plus an ADU. So it's really three households might be living on that property, even though it's described in the zoning ordinance as a two family.
Another thing to point out too is looking at the use chart. It shows how, the document you're looking at is pretty conservative and sticks to what is required per state law. Like some of the things Kim was talking about earlier that we looked at, like, allowing 3 families in additional zones and multifamily in additional zones isn't proposed here. So, this is trying to just stick with what was required per state law.
Now I'm down at Article 4, Division 2, Section 19-132, which I have as top of page 41. And this language here is word for word from the state law. This language sounds like we'll change this session, so it might change before the council adopts it. And if that case, I'm sure we would adopt the latest language, but this is what Kim had mentioned in terms of you shift down to the next zone in terms of your requirements. So if you have a 7,000 square foot lot and a 10,000 square foot minimum zoning district, you get the rules of a 5,000 square foot zoning district.
So the thing that the thing that we picked out on this, so this is a substandard lot. So say there's in a development or whatever in a zone, all the lots are 10,000, but somehow there's one lot in this, or one or two lots that have to be a 5,000 in the zone. You could, question is, and it's right now vacant. technically they'd have to get a zoning variance to allow you to build on that 5,000 square foot lot because it doesn't comply. The law now, the new law, which was this comply, the new law says you look to, and it says you look to a similar zone. It doesn't distinguish between residential or commercial, but
In the statute.
in the statute.
Yeah.
We're thinking ahead, and I think it's intended that obviously if it's a residential zone, you should be looking to a residential lot requirement, not a business lot requirement. So we added that in this, and we think that we're ahead of a state law, but we know that state law is pending to make that a little bit more clear. So, and that's really the help of the staff and pulling that out.
Section right below that, 19-133. This is the merger of substandard lots when you have more than one lot in common ownership. There was a provision kind of snuck in there at the end of 2023, and that shifted standards that may have been included to now be required. So we've added the bare minimum that we think is required under the statute for when you're looking at merger of substandard lots. And then section 19-134, this talks about floor area ratio. So that the idea is that if you have a 5,000 square foot lot, you put up a 1-story, 5,000 square foot building that takes up the whole lot, your floor area ratio would be 1. So your building size in relation to your lot size is 1. If you have that same 5,000 square foot lot, you put up a 3-story structure that happens to be 5,000 square feet total. Each floor is 1,600 square feet or whatever the math is. That also would have a floor area ratio of 1. The state amended some of the criteria for floor area ratio. Historically, it has been a standard provision required in zoning ordinances. Few municipalities have the provision. We have added it here as a safety net in case this ever comes up with an application. So the idea here is that this in actuality is no change, but it's a addition to safeguard the city against a aggressive developer. And then we come to the ADU section, which is 19-202.
So this is kind of important. I know you're probably going to get a lot of questions on this, so we'll go through this a little more carefully because this is a huge change, but it's all required to be comply with state law. So
Right. So this used to be an authorization of accessory dwelling units. The state has now authorized accessory dwelling units, as we mentioned, on every. The way they phrase it is every property where the principal use is a single or multifamily residential dwelling. And so this.
So
section of
that's
the-
like everything,
right, basically, yeah.
basically, not commercial, but
It's not commercial and it's not industrial. Interestingly, East Providence already allows what you might think of as an ADU on commercial and industrial properties. It uses different terminology. We didn't change that. I doubt that you have any of those in the city, maybe a few in the commercial core. But what we're really talking about here is the residential properties, and that's where the state made the change.
So every house in the city of East Providence, presently now, tomorrow, can build an ADU, converting garages or putting an apartment above a garage or anything like that without having to go through how much approval?
Building permit only.
Just a building
No
permit.
zoning relief.
No zoning relief. So right,
With some restrictions, with some exceptions, but yes, you're generally right.
I wish this was 20 years
I
ago. I
know.
wouldn't have bought my house. I wouldn't have had to move.
Right. Live in a garage, right? Yeah, you can
I
live
would have been able to expand,
Yeah.
but I'll just leave it at that.
Right.
This is a big change. This requires we're required to conform with this.
Yes.
There are some restrictions that we have put on or limits. So
Right.
we're going to go through those. But
So if you look at subsection B2 here, the state has restricted the ability of a municipality to not permit ADUs that are 2 bedrooms or smaller. We interpret that as having the authority to restrict ADUs of 3 bedrooms or more. So we have in here that you can't do an ADU any larger than 2 bedrooms. Some municipalities have elected to allow larger ADUs. if you think to the basic concept of an accessory dwelling unit being accessory, as in secondary to a primary dwelling unit, once you get to 3 bedrooms, you might be getting to the point where your ADU is bigger than your principal dwelling unit.
So what is the state saying on this? What is the
There's 2
state?
bedrooms you have to allow, and we're saying, well, we're not going to allow 3 bedrooms or
Right.
more, so you have
So-
to be 2 bedrooms or less.
Okay,
So a
2 or
bedroom-
less.
So my understanding, a bedroom is defined as having a closet. So, I mean, if you have a room that doesn't have a closet in it, I mean, that's not, I mean, you can
So
divide.
there's a
you can
square footage
divide the room.
maximum on here as well.
There is a square footage.
Yes.
Okay. I was just curious on that,
Yeah.
I know in real estate, when they look at houses, if you don't have it.
Right. So,
Alright.
I imagine the process here is you're required to get the building permit. Part of the building permit process, the zoning official looks at the building permit application. There's usually a floor plan in there, and in that would show closets, and the bedrooms would probably be labeled.
So so the ADU shall be no larger than 2 bedrooms, that's a 10. 2 bedrooms, that's a restriction which we put on. An ADU is permitted accessory use on the same lot where the principal use is a legally established residential use. So if you have a legally established residential use, you can put an ADU there automatically. Subject to building code issues, but automatically. So you'll see all the strikeouts because our ordinance used to kind of allow ADUs, but it was subject to a lot of review by the zoning officer and whatnot. That's why that's all stricken out.
And they were required for family members.
Right. That's right. That's the other issue. Used to be limited to family members, but now it's open to anybody. And that's just
And so the square footage requirements that we tied to, so this is the tightest you can be under state law. 2 bedroom can be up to 1,200 square feet or 60% of the floor area of the principal dwelling, whichever is less.
Yep.
It is, yep. And a 1 bedroom or studio can be up to 900 square feet or 60% of the floor area of the principal dwelling, whichever is less.
so all this,
Oh,
all the strikeouts
there-
is because of the stuff that the zoning officer used to be able to do. That's because it's permitted by right now. We got rid of all that review. We had to. And let's talk about little parking and we'll get to.
Yeah, just one point I want to bring up is there's some convoluted language in the state law about how you might restrict ADUs. Some municipalities are reading it as if the lot is less than a half acre in size, you might not be able to put up a new detached ADU, so that put a new structure in the yard. The way that we talked about it here is we didn't feel comfortable having that type of restriction. So as the solicitor mentioned, what we're permitting is an ADU on any property that is residential, regardless of the size of the lot. It's very clear under state law that anytime you have an existing building, you can carve up that building so that some of the building is assigned to the principal dwelling unit and some of it is assigned to the accessory. Where it's a bit of a gray area is if you have a detached structure like a detached garage or a shed, and your ability to convert that to an ADU or construct a new ADU in the yard.
But
What
any
what about
garage-
basements?
Basements would be part of an existing building,
part of it.
or if you had a shed with a basement, it'd be a little trickier. But if you mean as a part of the main house, then yes,
Part
you
of
can
the
put an
main house,
ADU in the
whether or
basement or
not-
the attic. Yep.
As Councilman said, without a closet, that wouldn't matter as long as it's part of the house,
Right. That might be a studio if it doesn't have a closet.
studio.
Well, right
Right.
now, every house that has an attached garage tomorrow, getting building approval can start.
Under state law,
converting-
yes.
The state law can convert that garage. That's the start of making it.
As long as they meet parking requirements.
sorry.
As long as they meet parking requirements. So if they're actually converting the garage itself, they might have a parking requirement issue. But as long as they continue to meet their parking requirements, yes.
You need parking, you need the regular building permits and things like that.
So, for an example, what would be the parking requirement for
Yeah,
a
for-
garage? Give me an example, like for.
Well, if you have a single
family
family, I
home.
think it's a 2 spaces. So if somehow your 2 spaces were only in the garage, if your garage was right on the street and you couldn't fit cars in the driveway, you can't lose those parking spaces to put in the ADU. Or you can have a parking requirement for the ADU. So let's say you now need 3 spaces, you have to find a place for that third car.
What's being proposed for the parking requirement on this ADU? I think it was.
That's 5, I think, right? Yep. So we looked at this closely. We were worried about, you know, you might have a 5-unit property in the city with no parking, and now they're getting an ADU on top of that. So we did want to have a parking requirement in certain circumstances. So what
I
we
don't see it in here, but maybe, no, I mean, maybe,
One additional.
maybe Ed can answer it.
page 46.
Right now, a single-family home, a 3-bedroom, single-family home, what's the requirement for cars?
Ed, just use the mic so it goes into the record. Please, thank you.
What is the, like,
We have a unique anomaly in our zoning ordinance that 3 units requires 4 parking spaces or 1 1/3. Otherwise, it's all 2 spaces per unit. So let's use an analogy of a duplex who wants to convert their basement to an ADU.
Let's start with a single family.
Single-
Well,
yeah.
all single families require 2 parking spaces.
2 parking spots? So if you add an ADU, you need to have 3 parking spots.
Well, I'm assuming, because I wasn't sure that we were mandating the requirement for an addition.
That's not what this says. No.
No, I mean, so it stays the same.
No, well, you have a little bit of discretion. So that's what we gave some
5.
discretion. Yeah. So we said if you're not meeting
Yeah.
the current required parking, so let's say you have a single family with no parking, then you need to put in a parking space.
But if you already have,
2, then we're not requiring a 3rd.
that's what I mean. So if you have room for 3, you're golden already.
Right.
Yeah, so in conversing as a group, we're also balancing that we're concerned, probably the number one biggest concern is we have too much impervious coverage already, and we're trying to address drainage and the aesthetics. So the point being is, if we keep mandating more parking, and especially with an ADU, because most ADUs, either you're going to accommodating a loved one or a single person and so forth, and a lot of people don't drive cars. Why are we forcing creating more hard surface if it's not going to be required? Obviously, we were concerned, what about instances where you already are overstressing a neighborhood and now you're creating more stress? So in those instances, so if you're in compliance and we realize one deficiency of parking space, is that really going to harm a neighborhood? We don't believe so.
Good. I just want to check in that.
The state allows you to require up to 1 parking space per bedroom of the ADU.
And even though Ed said likely to be a family member, make it very clear, ADUs no longer have to be a family member.
No, but what I'm saying,
but just
but the
clarify.
instances of where we've seen and how the ADUs, we probably got about a dozen of them already in the city. I'm just shifting of how many I've approved, and from what I hear from other communities, they're either accommodating a loved or family member, or it's just a single person, because they're usually on the smaller side. Because remember, they're limited to 60% of the principal living area. So if you take a house that has 1,800 square feet of living area and you multiply by 0.6, you're going to be limited to so it's going to be small units. These are not going to be large units.
Why don't you stay here?
Oh, we've got a lot of, please bring it in. For state purposes, we have to track them. So we've already created the module in our permitting system. So when you apply for an ADU, it's right there locked in. We can track them.
Ed, stay at the dais here.
So
I was gonna sneak out.
I know.
next is multifamily. So again, we're changing a little language to align with state law. The big issue is section 19-218, where the way we're interpreting substandard lot, you cannot require a certain size lot for a certain size multifamily property. We're reversing that and saying, well, you can only have so much density. So we just change the numbers so that if you have a 10,000 square foot lot and you want to put in a 4-unit property, that's fine. But once you go to 5 units, that's not allowed. So we just had to change the language, and then the way it's calculated is it's averaged out based on the number of bedrooms that you have. So this was existing language, the number of bedrooms. And we just put in there that an ADU doesn't count. And if you have a mix of, let's say, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units, that you get the average. So we had all the calculation in here that if you have a 2-bedroom, a 1-bedroom, a studio, which counts as a 1-bedroom, and an ADU, then your density would be the average basically of 2,000 for the 2-bedroom and then the 1,500 for the 2 single-bedroom units, and it gives you an average of 1,667. And then you go down to Division 10, Section 19-261, just changing the language for trailer court to manufactured home court, and you'll see that in a few more sections.
So that section 19261 that talks about trash. So would ADUs be allowed an extra trash bin from the city, recycling, or does that not matter? They share the house. I mean,
Not a zoning issue
not a zoning.
currently.
Okay.
So it might become a zoning issue, or it might be a different section.
So
of
it's at the discretion of the
this
city administration or
ordinances.
DPW, or if we would.
Yeah, that's more for, the current ordinances for dumpsters for those particular uses, basically.
Right. So if you have, I don't know if it's the number's 4 units or more than 4 units, is when it's treated as commercial from a trash recycling storage perspective. It's an interesting question because from our world, an ADU is not a dwelling unit. From our world,
It may be in the building code, and then the tax assessment is an entirely different thing.
so, but from the building fire code, if I'm going from a 2 to a 2 and an ADU, I'm going to 3. I got to meet a building code and fire code of 3 units. So it's an interesting question.
And again, with that, just so there's not an additional address like it is in 25A, or we're not creating an additional address. It's still that one address. So we're not.
We don't regulate address.
I don't
No, I'm just
No,
saying.
I honestly don't know how to
by
answer that.
city standpoint,
It's a good question.
as
I don't-
far as
yeah,
you know, what I'm saying from the police, fire, and everything like that. Now you get a call. You get a call to 19 19 Mockingbird Way. That fire department shows up. They're going to 19 Mockingbird Way. Where are they going in? You could be fast. You might not be home. That fire department now doesn't. I mean, this is a logistic question from there. Where does that fire department
I
go?
guarantee you I can get you an answer tomorrow because we have ADUs going up. So
No,
I
I'm
asked
just
the building
curious.
official how he's handling
Yeah,
it.
that's a
I'm
good
just
question. We don't
curious
know.
on
Yeah,
that.
good
Yeah,
question.
how that works.
One of the other things that municipalities are struggling with is condoization. Is if you condoize your property, can an ADU be transferred separately from the principal unit? And we don't
Yeah.
speak to that in the zoning ordinance, but I think it will come up somewhere in the state.
Thank you. Next.
So Division 11, Section 19-279, this is what we view as a victim of the change in definition to development plan review. So whether or not this was the practice, there was a provision here that shared parking would be reviewed by the zoning officer. And we thought that was inconsistent with the new state law. So we're folding that into development plan review, which is further down in this draft amendment. Then you see in section 19-281, the change from 1 to single family. And then 19-283 is similar, where it was a zoning official review of a plan, and that's now been moved to DPR.
So again, the thing that gets complicated is obviously when you change the process of the definitions in one section, it affects other sections. So that's why you'll see a lot of strikeouts. So you got to kind of look at it as a whole. You have to look at this ordinance as a whole. So you'll see a lot of strikeouts. It doesn't mean that we're getting rid of stuff. It does mean we're getting rid of stuff. But the reason why we're getting rid of stuff is because we added stuff that we're required to do by state law that perhaps like the zoning officer used to be able to review. Now the state law says, no, you can't go to the zoning officer. You have to go to the planning board or the planning department. And so we struck all the provisions that gave that individual the authority to review.
And then similarly, section 19-284 at the top here, was a zoning official review. Now it's required to be development plan review. Bottom of page 51, and then moving on to the table on the top of page 52, a change in 1 to single family, and then the way the state is defining ADU and how it uses multifamily, we've slid 2-family and 3-family into the definition of multifamily. So the parking requirements are for multifamilies that are not 2 or 3-family there. Then bottom of page 54, the same table, changing the word trailer to manufactured home.
Okay, so I think as far as the the minor changes like that, we don't, I mean,
Okay.
I think you guys get that, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Like, let's go to 60,
Yep.
like for the permitted. use.
55, same thing, and then 56, same thing. More notice stuff, and then what page did you say to jump to, Mike?
We're looking at permitted uses, and we look at antennas. You updated the antenna.
Yeah, so that's
58, 57.
60 permitted uses. This is the article on antennas, and
Towers and antennas.
towers and antennas, right? And this is similarly a DPR issue and also a notice issue. So the changes in here have some items related to notice and aligning that with state zoning notice requirements, and then also shifting the review of antennas and towers to DPR away from a zoning official review.
So that's why you see a lot.
There's a lot of track changes for that, but that's all it's doing.
So there's still a review. It's just not with the zoning officer. It goes to the development plan review at the planning staff or the planning board level.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't.
And then
I don't want anyone to suggest that we're getting rid of towers and there's no review. There is a review. We're just conforming that review.
Switching
Switching it. Yes.
page 67 had used the word duplex. We just changed that to two-family to match the rest of the ordinance. And top of page 69, this is related to antennas and towers. And we're using the state law language, which is permitting authority, which would be likely the planning board or planning staff.
So if you go to section 19-360.1, that's the criteria for the two-family homes in those zones.
Yep.
So we looked at the use table earlier, and we had two-family homes, two-family in the R5 and R6, which used to be tied to a dimensional requirement.
Right.
We now say that you can build the two-family homes in R5 and R6, but the lot shall have an area of at least 50% greater than the minimum lot area, and in the R4 district, the lot shall have an area of 75% greater than the minimum lot size. We just took that requirement and put it in a separate category, so hopefully to withstand legal review.
Yes.
So, I mean, and it's by special use permit. It's not automatic. They have to, if they meet those criteria, they will get it, but there still would be a review by the zoning board or planning board, as the case may be.
Mm-hmm. So the next is Article 5, land development projects, which we talked a little bit about. We are adding the bottom of section 19-361. It says zoning incentives. This is mirroring a state law change. And so we are just using the exact language referring to that state law where land development zoning incentives are required in certain circumstances for land development projects. And then section 19-364, which is also land development projects, just aligning the use of multifamily in the middle of page 73 with the other portions of the zoning code. And then moving on to development plan review, bottom of page 76. If you look at the definition of development plan review, it's only permitted now in certain circumstances. We felt the city best aligned to that definition as an urban center. So this is adding a provision that declares the city of East Providence an urban center to align with the definition of development plan review and enable development plan review in the city. It used to be development plan review was much more open-ended. The legislature in their infinite wisdom has restricted development plan review, and for instances like these parking lots and loading areas and cell towers where we want to take advantage of this very streamlined review process, we have to fit into one of those categories. So that's what this language does. Is
It protects the city's right to have the review, basically.
yes.
This is good for the city.
And then also, similarly to land development projects, the definitions are slightly different, but the review processes are very similar. The way the state law is written, it's not clear whether a municipality can dictate which process an applicant applies to. So we wanted to make the processes very similar. We're also permitting zoning incentives that would mirror those of land development projects here, section 19-450. So that's bottom of page 76, top of page 77. And then we had to make, I think, just a couple changes to the waterfront district to align with state law. So that's bottom of page 77 about notice. And then changing the term one family to single family at the bottom of page 78. And that's everything.
Thank you.
I would say to whoever did the copying, thank you for copying both sides because, you know, it looks like a lot of paper here and people always question us about that, but that was efficiently done. Thank you for that. And we have more to do, I'm sure. I would ask the zoning officer, thank you for being here. Do you have any general comments on this process or?
No, I think a lot of it, because state law basically superseded, we've had some good practice already in enforcing it. Stuff has been happening for 2 years, so it brought guidance to the table. We've had some practical application. We've already had to deal with some nuances. How do you interpret certain things? So it helped with the discussion and the conversation, how to clean this up.
So we have a smooth transition with planning and zoning and building, getting all of this. Patrick, Dominic, do you need to add anything?
No, I can't add anything. If anything, I think this is just going to streamline the process, provide a lot more clarification to the developers. You know, and it's going to help us a lot with having the concept meetings, pre-application meetings. Everybody's going to know the process and the length of the permitting process.
Thank you. And before I get to Council Vice President Rigo and Solicitor closing, there are a couple of members here, the public who were here. Do you want to add anything in this process briefly? Or?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Melody Pimentel. I live at 22 Manning Drive in Riverside, Rhode Island. I am here as a member of the public, and I'd like to first thank everyone for being here tonight and listening to many of the proposals that I believe will have a positive impact in increasing housing density and thereby lowering the cost of homes in our city. Things like small lot zoning, townhomes, and ensuring accessibility, and many other proposals tonight I am proud to support, and I'm hopeful that we'll adopt some of these policies tonight. At the same time, I would also like to address the proposed inclusionary zoning mandate, requiring 20% of units in developments of 10 or more to be restricted as affordable units. I believe that, so I share the concern here for our housing crisis. Our friends and neighbors are struggling with rising shelter costs, and some are leaving East Providence and others face homelessness. But I think that this well-intentioned proposal risks making some things worse. For instance, there's research from the Turner Center at UC Berkeley that shows that higher inclusionary zoning requirements reduce both affordable and market rate housing production. And there's, in Portland, they did something similar. And that mandate actually slowed down development and failed to deliver enough affordable units. So I ask, how will the city ensure that this 20% mandate doesn't choke off that market rate housing supply and drive costs up for folks? So the problem that I see is that some of these affordable units need subsidies. Without them, developers may stop building or cluster projects at 9 units to dodge that mandate. That's a concern that I have regarding that proposal. What funding will the city provide to offset those costs and to prevent them from avoiding that requirement altogether? Some experts have warned in some studies that unfunded mandates like this raise market rate prices to cover those losses, thus further burdening residents who only qualify to purchase market rate homes. So instead of like a broad, risky 20% mandate, why not take like a more measured approach? So start like a 10% requirement and maybe increase it if the data pans out. So I think that's a reasonable compromise here. Or even convene a housing and planning committee to further study this issue and propose further incremental improvements to our zoning and planning regulations in our city. And I think we could encourage a lot of market rate housing by easing some of our zoning rules, generating a lot of tax revenue at no public cost. Research shows that market rate homes reduce displacement just like affordable ones, but without straining our public funding. Broad mandates have unintended consequences. In the example I mentioned earlier, Portland's housing production plummeted 81.6% following their implementation of their specific inclusionary zoning provision. and I'd rather not risk that here. So I think we should choose like a incremental, data-driven approach to this instead of going straight for 20%. And again, I appreciate the hard work of everyone at this table and the time the council and the consultants have put into this. However, instead of going forward the inclusionary zoning proposal tonight, I think it's important to study it further and go with, again, that incremental approach that I am advocating for. Again, thank you so much.
We did discuss Portland, I think, at one point, one of our meetings. I think that's something when next step is to get this before the planning board. And I would hope that the planning department would look into those concerns and see what, nothing is set in stone because this is a work session and we haven't adopted anything yet. Certainly that's the goal we set. And the other thing that we need to know, of course, I think even if it was to be adopted as presented tonight, I know the administration and the planning department is committed to making this work. And if it doesn't work, we can always change it. Right? So there's nothing is set in stone. So the council has the ability to change this anytime with sufficient public hearings. But I think it was important, speaking for the administration, that we start somewhere. And that was the first step tonight. So they're all very good comments. And I'm going to ask my friends in the planning department if they could pull that study to see if we can maybe share that with the council members and myself just to take a look at it, because it sounded very interesting. Because that was a concern that was raised about whether we were forcing people to develop 9 units or less, basically. So,
Thank you. I agree, and thank you, Melody, for those comments. Before I go to the council vice president on the consultants, any closing comments as we move forward?
Thank you for having us. I have two concerns. One is that we don't have the entire council present, and I would just ask you to share your experience and your understanding tonight so that we can get the entire leadership on board with suggested changes.
That's the plan. Yep.
And of course, as you saw tonight, there are other tools, and we would ask you to consider additional tools such as transit-oriented development and small lot zoning.
When is your contract up with USA, the city? So
Now. Wait, so the grant term is 18 months, and we are nearing the 18 months. It's a hard stop for the funding agency. However, there's a new round of funding and a new sort of set of planning priorities that the city of East Providence might benefit from the new set of.
and I don't want to belabor this, longer, but we also don't want to do anything, next week. So we want to keep researching and everything. But I think we also want to move as soon as possible, reasonably. And that sounds like we might, be able to continue.
I believe there are additional opportunities to sort of further the work that we've done.
I have seen drafts of some of the transportation zoning that we've talked about and some other issues that are in draft form. Because of the amount of material that's coming out that we required, we thought it would be better to kind of give you small bites of this.
Yes.
And so that's kind of where we're working, because honestly, we also think that there'll be more changes, mandatory changes from the legislature that's coming down when the session ends.
The other thing I will take some editorial opportunity to say is the other piece of this is the comprehensive plan, and the zoning has to align with the comprehensive plan and follows the comprehensive plan. So to the extent that the zoning can be adopted after a comprehensive plan amendment, that will make all of this easier, and also greatly enhance the city's ability to enforce its rules. The state legislature has been hammering that they want the comprehensive plans to be up to date. So
we're in the middle of that process as well. So I agree. Hopefully we will. Thank you, everybody. I would ask Council Vice President Rigo for closing comments before we adjourn the work session.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the consultants, the city officials here tonight, taking their time out of their long workday to be here for this work session. I am happy to see that you talked about in your plan to keep some of the historical aspects of the city. I think this is very important. My constituents, as well as people in the city, if you read things going on, we just don't want to have that cookie cutter city. Urban, as you call East Providence, an urban area, but we're multi-dimensional. I live God forbid you call where I am an urban area. So who I represent. So suburban.
He's talking about Rumford.
So thank you, Mr. President. I think that's very, we need to maintain the characteristics of, that. And I think a lot of, again, people of concern that have reached out to me saying that we don't want this, we don't want Smith Hill, shoving things down our throats. That doesn't make sense. I think there's obviously an urgent situation in the city, as I stated in the comments that came out in the press release. We need to have, houses need to turn all the time in the community. Generations go, next family up with 2 or 3 kids move in. It keeps the city vibrant. It keeps the local economics vibrant. When you have young kids that are playing sports, involved in things, you spend more money in restaurants if it's pizza or anything like that than people who are, as you talked about, the households are dropping one person. Well, they probably not going to go out and eat as much. So it's that domino effect. The more vibrant the city is, and as we all grow older, vibrant means younger enthusiasm. And again, somebody sells their house, the next person comes in and pulls building permits. Next time that house is assessed, they might have put a whole addition on, did it over. The value of our property increases, and there's more of a maintenance situation. We don't become one of those cities that you see in the Midwest that I guess the terminology I'll use is a dead community. You need vibrant, and you need it going on. And I think this is a step with the ADUs. And if we do, as I said, that planning on in East Greenwich is something I envision here. I have a great property I know in my ward that would be ideal for that, and pushing for it. And that's what we need here. So I want to thank you. I think we're on the right direction. And hopefully in a couple of months, this can all be, after we wait for what happens up at the General Assembly, we can put a stamp of approval on it here at the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Rigo. And I want to thank you for your leadership and stepping in when I've been unable to make some of these preliminary meetings. And thank you for stepping up. So with that, also thank Deputy Clerk Stoddard for assistance tonight. Mike, thank you for all of your help. This concludes